Hello, everyone. Welcome to your second Snap Take of the day. This is Glazer of Snap Judgments, the official podcast of Marvel Snap Zone, and we've got for you 28 decks with cards changed in the OTA. That's right, you heard me. 28 decks. The meta's brand new. We're going to review the OTA. We're going to talk about all these decks, all these fundamentally changed and new cards. We've got some positive things to say, some negative things to say, some new takes on decks. But before we get started, please hit that sub button. Every day on this channel, except Saturday, we bring you 3 new decks at the very least, along with bundle reviews, pro tips, everything you need for your Marvel Snap journey. Hit that sub button. We are also in the middle of a giveaway. We're giving away a Naughty or Nice bundle thanks to one of our viewers. So all you have to do is comment on yesterday's video with how you replaced Jeff and Lad while climbing CL. Announce the winner. We will announce the winner for that giveaway in tomorrow, Friday's video. So make sure you enter and check that out. In addition, we maintain a giveaway sheet of every active giveaway Marvel Snap, so make sure you check that out. It's in the description to the video. It will help you find some great content creators and hopefully win you some cool free stuff. This is the OTA, and oh boy, it's a big one. All right, let's go through these one by one, then we'll go through the cards and their new decks. So first and foremost, Professor X is a 5/1. That's going to kill the card the way it was used before. 1 power is so little that this is now an extraordinarily high-risk card. However, huge, bold, giant, however, it now works with Ravonna Renslayer. We have a nice consistent way on turn 2, not turn 3, to get Professor as a turn 4 play. What that being on turn 2 means is that you have powerful plays on turn 3 that you can make that will make Professor X, that will make up for the power of Professor X and still help you win that lane. That's huge. That's a difference maker. So Professor X is now in different decks. We're going to try him in the same decks as always. We'll look at the decks that he's been good at, but I think he's fundamentally a new card here. Werewolf by Night is away from Surfer. There goes one of my favorite decks in the game. Oops. He is from a 3/3 to a 4/4, which makes sense. I don't like it. I predicted I predicted sort of 5 of these changes in this morning's video. You can check out the video. I have full documentation that I guessed these before anyone knew the OTA. So, like, hell yeah. I guess Professor X would be a 5/2. I guess Werewolf would be a 3/1. I guess Widow's Bite would stop having a negative effect, although that one was me sharing Peacefuls. I guessed Viper 3/3 or 3/4 exactly. And I guessed 4/1 for Ronin. So, like, I nailed this shiz. Didn't get the changes right, but hey, I got the changes. Very, very happy with that. Okay. Werewolf as a 4/4 means that it's in completely different decks, or the decks it's in have to, like, really alter themselves to work. I think what this largely means, like what this especially means, is that the bounce shell is going to be really hard to use because you can't curve Werewolf into Beast now. And I also think that, like, there's now going to be a Zabu Werewolf shell instead of a Zabu Darkhawk shell. And I think Werewolf is still going to be a really powerful card in these shells, but I think it's going to have to work differently. Although, again, we will try it in the same shells to see. Part of the reason I think the Darkhawk shell is gone because the most powerful thing the Darkhawk shell was doing outside of Darkhawk right now was multiple Black Widows, and they went and made Black Widow a 3/3. That is a giant difference. That one extra cost is huge when bouncing a card. You will note that there is no 3 in all of Marvel Snap that we play consistently to bounce. If a 3 comes down, it's meant to stay on the board, which means Widow probably has to stay on the board because playing 5 over several turns for her is a lot. But as a 3/3 now, she's a body with real stats. She's fairly similar to Korg now, and she probably still sees play in Darkhawk decks. The question is, can you afford that many 3s in Darkhawk decks? I don't know the answer yet. Especially because right now you have to leech on 5, so you don't really have a second turn to play 3s, right? Like, you want to play a 3-on-3, obviously, and then you want to play a 3 on 5 with a 2, but you can't do that because Darkhawk decks need leech because Blob is in the meta. So this might have kicked Widow out. It might not have, but it might have kicked Widow out. Martyr gets to be a 1/5. I love it. That's super important. Martyr's now also, just for the record, really, really good with Professor X. So if you go Martyr, um, Ravona, I don't know, Lizard on 3, or I don't know, Gladiator on 3, and to Professor X, you're gonna win that lane. Right? Like you've now locked a lane that you win, which is pretty nice. Viper is now a 3/4. This is obnoxious. I thought they would do it, but I didn't want them to do it. I wish they had told us this was happening before people went and bought Havok. I bought Havok. The 1 in 5-ish games that you could pull Havok Viper is now gone, right? You can do that play now, but now you're playing Havok on 2 and Viper on 3, and that's a huge difference. Sorry, Havok on 3 and Viper on 4, and that's a huge difference. Locking someone at 4 versus locking them at 2 or 3 is wildly different. It's still a powerful play, but it's no longer completely insane. You do have if you have Ravona, who just got like a super buff with this patch between Professor X and this, that you can make that play entirely on turn 4. Our friend Lauren will run the math. Lauren, whatever. I was mad at Lauren. All right, will run that math for us because she's amazing, and let us know whether or not, like, what the percentage of Viper Havok on 4 is. Look, there's a certain number of decks that die to Viper Havok on 4, and there's a certain number of decks that die to Electro on 3, Viper Jeff on 4, and you Viper over the Electro, and then you just have Jeff. So, like, we're going to have to run math on these, and if those work, then this is still going to be a really, really powerful deck, and we will go from there. My working assumption is this is still going to be really strong. It's just not going to be, like, quite as toxic, because 4 is a playable number. I thought Ronin would be cooler as a 5/1, but he's good as a 5/5. This basically says, let's act as if your opponent always has 1 card in hand. I thought they would change Ronin because they drop Master Mold and they want people to, like, be excited and happy to get and play Master Mold. So I guess that makes sense to me that they do this with Ronin. They further buff this by making Maximus from a 3/7 to a 2/6. Maximus had fallen out of Surfer deck, so I don't really mind this. Meanwhile, Maximus will now find a home in Sera decks and Ronin decks. I think Ronin decks can be good here now. I still think they're not going to be meta. Whereas if Ronin were a 4-cost card, I think they would be. But I think that this is going to be at least very good. Because Ronin on 4, okay, let me explain. Ronin as a 4-drop card would mean Sera on 5. And that would mean Maximus and Master Mold only cost 1, and now you're really, really cooking with hot fire. Gladiator got the +1 buff he probably should have always had. This is a very, very powerful effect now. I think that the closer you get him to Shang-Chi range, where anything he can't kill can get shunged, the better he's often going to be, although it's generally not ideal to give your opponent things for free. I still don't think he's great, but he's better. And they gave Punisher 1 extra power, and I still think Punisher is bad. I hope I'm proven wrong, but, like, 1 power wasn't the difference between Punisher being good or bad. He's going to win X percentage of games now that he wouldn't, but he's also just not good still. All right, we're going to begin by talking about Werewolf by Night and looking at Werewolf decks. Everybody ready for some Werewolf? Our first Werewolf deck is Loki. I think that there's a fundamental redesign to Loki now, where Loki wants Zabu. If you get Zabu out, you can Werewolf on 3 still, and then your game plan goes fine. You lose the power of Collector Werewolf no matter what. You can go Zabu into Loki if you don't see Collector and just be perfectly fine as well. All of that is fine, right? Like, you have a reasonable chance of getting some force from the opponent, so Zabu's not going to be dead. If you do that when you draw Werewolf late, it's still powerful. You still have basically the rest of the Loki package. I felt like we needed extra power now for, like, the times this doesn't work, so I feel like it's a Devil Dino deck now. I think this is probably good. Loki is significantly worse. I think this is probably the best shell or close to the best shell, but it's a worse shell than it was 2 days ago. Or, I mean, I guess a few hours ago. So, did they finally kill Loki? I think they finally pushed Loki, like, actually out of tier 1. I will let someone like Lambie prove me wrong, but I think they finally pushed Loki out of tier 1. It doesn't have a secondary power thing that can just win games like Werewolf, like it did before. Like, it needed Werewolf and Collector, or Collector and Elsa. And now Werewolf is, like, in the deck, but not nearly as good. And Collector is harder to use with Werewolf. So, like, it further separates those two plans and should punch Loki right in the face. Now that they did this, I'm sure they're going to nerf Loki into oblivion, right? Like, I feel like they're not going to realize how badly they just punched Loki in the face and then further mess up Loki. But maybe I'm wrong. All right, here's another version. This is a very similar deck. This one just literally says, okay, but what if we run Falcon instead? And again, we have the same issues. This cuts Devil Dino and says we're going to top out on 4s because Shang-Chi, along with Werewolf and Loki, are now all 4s. Again, remember that the card creators don't update, so really sorry about that, but it'll be up in a little while. But Werewolf is a 4, Shang is a 4, Loki is a 4. That makes Zabu good in the deck, basically, no matter what. Bounce, I think the best versions of Bounce now will be the Annihilus ones because they can put a lot of power out when you don't get the beast things going. I think Zabu is in the deck now because, like, look at all those 4s. It's Werewolf, Darkhawk, and Shang, and Sentry. You can conceivably cut Darkhawk just fine here, but, like, the deck is definitely different. Also, note the lack of Black Widow. That's the spot I put Zabu in. If you think Widow is better than Rockslide because you have Annihilus, that's totally fine. Replace Rockslide with Widow. It doesn't really matter. There's also, like, a paucity of ones. There's very few ones in this deck at this point, which can hurt because I think you need Leech if you want to run Darkhawk. Same concept, but now we're running more ones, and we're cutting the Darkhawk package, replaces with Iceman, keeps Korg because putting rocks in the deck is just good, and says otherwise I've got more bounce. I think this is likely to be better. This is where I'm going to start testing Werewolf, just so everyone knows. This deck, exactly card for card, is where I am beginning my Werewolf testing. I think that this is going to be quite good. Further bounce decks. Again, I was like, I made this one, and then I went, oh no, I don't have a Shadow King. So this one says, what if I just cut Annihilus and assume that I can still win games off Werewolf and Disruption? Like, that's what this is going to have to win on, right? Like, Werewolf and Disruption. It's, and I guess Demon, but it's going Ham and Iceman to try and disrupt, and Shadow King to try and shut down opponents. Again, reasonable chance of winning here. I like this deck better, although honestly, I might have to find room for Shadow King the way the meta is right now. But I like this one. I like the previous one better. Oh, Professor X. So, um, I think this is good. I don't think this is like a meme or anything. I think this is just a good deck. You've still got the Psylocke into Professor X thing, right? Like, it's less powerful, but you can do it, and you can still pump it with Blue Marvel. There's a chance that you want to make sure that you have like a Maximus out or something like that early so that you can, like, bump into it. So, like, if you go Maximus 2, Psylocke 3, you should be okay, right? You can also go Ravonna into Maximus and, like, a Power Stone into Professor X, and you should be okay. You need Blue Marvel, and you might also need Claw. I wanted to try Iron Man here, though, not Claw, because I wanted the extra Ravonna target. It's a good Ravonna target. Remember, Maximus is a 2/6 now. There are only 2 Ravonna targets in the deck. You can add more if you want, but I've got Blob, so I don't really want to add more, and that's the counter synergy of this exact version. But I think there's something here, then there's something worth experimenting with. This is where I think the money is, just for the record. I think this will be sick. It's a Galactus deck, right? Except it's also just got a little Ravonna Professor X package. If you can lock up a lane on turn 4, Iron Man and Onslaught are going to win you a lane, right? Iron Man and Mystique are going to win you a lane. And you can lock up a lane on turn 4 relatively easily with either Hobgoblin or Professor X. Nebula is now a great partner for Professor X on 4. Wave is a great partner for Professor X. Ms. Marvel is a great partner for Professor X. Helps that all these cards also happen to work with Galactus. This deck is good. Cool? Like, I think this deck is almost without any doubt or question going to be good. If you're losing a Professor X lane, make sure it's not center. If you're losing a Professor X lane right or left, you can drop Ms. Marvel on 5 and Onslaught on 6 and add 10 to that lane, and it's just going to win a lot of games of Snap. Cool. Next up, another version of Galactus that's running Ravonna. Which one is better? Good question. Testing will show it. This is a more standard Galactus. It's running the Junk package again. A decent way to use Professor X, if you see Ravona but can't get that lane, is you can Hobgoblin that lane, then Professor X it. Seems like that's probably going to win you that lane most of the time. If your opponent's busy contesting there, you can often sneak off a Galactus, but you don't have to, because if you just went Hobgoblin Professor X, odds are you have priority. And if you have priority, Alliath wins you the game. It's working theory for this one. Ongoing, I don't know if this is good, but again, we're trying Ravona with Professor X, and they're both ongoing, so why not? Same basic concept as all the others, except we're using an ongoing package here. The ongoing package here has been very close to meta for a while now. It's possible this pushes it over the top by accident, because now Ravona along with Zabu have hits, right? Like Ravona can hit Professor X, Iron Man, and Mystique, while Zabu can hit Iron Lad and Ms. Marvel, and like once the deck gets cheap enough, it's really strong. Negative, I don't think this works. I'm going to be completely honest. I don't know what this build is, but there's got to be something here with Ravona and Professor X in negative. If you negative Professor X and draw it on turn 5, and I know it's hard to draw it on turn 5, right? That's a 1/5 Professor X, which seems like it's probably going to win a game or two. At that point, you just go like Wong, Black Panther in another lane, and you have a wonderful time, right? Like you're going to win. I don't know if this works. I'm not the best negative cook or pilot, but it seems like there's probably something here. More Thanos. This is more of a standard Thanos. I said, let's not bother with Ravona. Let's see if we can just keep running Thanos, but instead go bigger on priority cards. So cards like Crossbones, Iron Lad, Devil Dino, Vision, if you can like cheat a Vision out and then Professor X on top of that Vision. Blue Marvel to spread the power. Jeff should all like have a reasonable shot at getting you a Professor X lane. This is one of the better versions of Thanos. Let's see if it still works. This is one of the better versions of W's Lockdown. Let's see if it works with Professor X this way. I think Storm might give it enough play. If you storm one lane, assuming they're going to contest it, and then you drop Professor X on a Medusa in another lane, you're probably fine. And you can still use cards like Vision and Doom to contest that Storm lane later, or Ms. Marvel to contest that Storm lane later. So, like, there's some real value here and some real counterplay and trickery that might make this quite good. We are on to Viper. So, I have a really good Viper build this morning, just for the record. I think this one might be good. This just seems solid, right? Like Viper is a 3/4. So if you go, you can now Viper Ravona on 4. You can also Viper over that hood just fine, or you can Viper over some rocks, and none of that's a problem. If you must, you can. There's worse things to Viper over than Ironheart too. Ravona is great here. Ironheart at 2, Patriot at 2 are both great. Wolfsbane at 2, Hobgoblin at 4, White Tiger at 4. You've got a ton of plays here. There's games where just Wong into debris locks up their board, and there's not a thing they can do about it. Snap, win, have a great day. You can always drop Ironheart on that to really add a bunch of power to it, or drop Patriot on it to really add a bunch of power to it. And when that happens, you've won the game of Snap. Like, there's just a lot to like about this deck. I think it's really, really powerful. This is, again, one of the first places I'm starting with Viper. I think that the Viper combo might still be good. Again, I want Lauren to do the math before I mess with it too much, but this deck looks really good to me. It's like a negative list negative. All right, Galactus is going to, again, work. This is similar to the other decks we looked at with Professor X. This one doesn't bother Professor X. Instead says, I've got 2 NPE ways to win. I can say Galactus, right? Or I can Viper Havok. I could also Viper Electro if you're playing like a bounce deck and auto win that way. There's lots of ways to win with this deck, which is a lovely place to be, right? If you can Viper over Electro, you now have 6 energy on turn 5, right? So that seems like it's pretty good. You can go Hood Annihilus right there, or Sentry Hood, and then you can drop Annihilus. You have 7 power last turn. Annihilus with like a green goblin to end the game. These things are powerful. This deck should be good. On to Max. Max is now 2/6. So we talked already about this, but I think he has a really good home in Thanos. He was good as a 3/7. He's great as a 2/6. It helps counter opposing blobs, and it gives you a good thing to get you your Professor X. That's the whole concept of him here. Next up, this is the one I'm actually excited for. I think there's something to this. Sera has stopped existing for a while. I think this might make Sera exist again because you can go Zebu, Werewolf, and Maximus. So if you can get even without, right? Like let's say you go something along the lines of Bishop into Werewolf into Sera. Your last turn will now feature a 2-cost Hit Monkey, a 1-cost Mysterio, a 1-cost Maximus, or only up to 4 energy, Shadow King, and Jeff. That seems like it's probably going to win. Be a little careful with space to make sure you can jump your Werewolf a couple times. Your Bishop gets huge. Everything wins. Enjoy your victory. Seems like that's probably positive. I don't know. Um, I think that this might be a real deck, and I'm really excited to try it. Sera hasn't existed for a while, and it really should. I would like an extra 4 for the Zabu here, but like Werewolf on 3 is just so freaking potentially good that I don't really mind going a little all out. Might be able to cut Shang and Zabu here though, and just go even more in on 2s. I don't know. I'm gonna mess with this. I think there's something here. Gotta get my friend Turbo back so we can play with this more. Ronin. So this is like the obvious home, the standard Ronin deck. Again, I'm trying Werewolf Zabu shenanigans in as many decks as possible. This one, remember, Maximus is a 2, Werewolf is a 4. This one will have Lad along with Shang and Werewolf as our Zabu targets. That's plenty. Really wish Ronin was moved to a 4, but since he's not, whatever. Everything else here is fairly self-explanatory. I can end the game if I go Ronin, I can end the game with Maximus and Mold. That's 4 energy, and still have an energy for a Mordo to really screw up their hand, or an Iceman and Spider Ham, which should bounce around that Werewolf, for example. And now like I've just got a ton of power. I love that kind of thing. I think Ronin's likely to be good in this shell. Not amazing, but good. Same deal. This one's just a lockdown Ronin. Professor X should still be reasonably good here because again, Professor X works with Maximus. You're not really cheating at Professor X, but if you've got a Maximus Ms. Marvel lane, that's 11 power. Professor X is going to make that 12. Jeff can make that a 15 power lane on turn 5. That's hard to contest and should win fairly often. You've also got Nebula, and if Nebula is growing, Professor X on Nebula is really good. If you can lock that lane, either Ronin or Lithe should win the game. Black Widow. So, standard Darkhawk. I think that she still has a home here. I felt like we had to cut Killmonger. I threw Echo in because I want to stop opposing ongoing stuff. But this is our standard Ika Leechhawk deck. Except Widow's now way worse than it, right? Because like you can't play her on 2. And she was extremely powerful on 2. It is nice to have another 3/3 for the deck, though, I'm not gonna lie. So the issue is that there's not really early plays. So I thought Echo was a good early play that like prevents your opponent's tempo. Fair enough to be played. If you can think of any other early stuff to do that would make this deck better, I'd absolutely love to hear it. Because that's what this deck really wants. Next up, we have Annihilus. This is just Widow stays in an Annihilus deck. Again, I'm not sure what we do with the early game without Widow. Widow being in the early game was really helping these decks sing, and I think it's really hurt without it. But this is a standard Annihilus list. Again, another standard Darkhawk list. This one I think works better because what you're trying to do early is sort of just like disrupt a little bit, and then you're just sort of killing time and like locking them up before you can Moon Girl. I think this deck might be coming back into the meta, although it can't run Leech, and that's kind of a problem with Blob everywhere because it's not going over the top of Blob. Gladiator. Gladiator's good in Junk. Gladiator's always been good in Junk. It's just Junk isn't great. Here's a Gladiator Junk deck. This probably should just throw in a Havok, right? Except that once you play Havok, you're locking yourself out of Goliath. So whatever. Everything else about this deck is pretty good and fairly self-explanatory. This is saying no one's really trying to counter Junk right now, so why not play the damn card? I like Gladiator with Shang again. Widow is really strong here, although you don't want to eat it with Carnage anymore. It's now strong enough. And so like this deck might have gotten too expensive to be good now because Widow's a 3 and Viper's a 3 from 2/2. So it's now a more expensive deck. Let's see if it's really good still or not. So like they had to change Widow, right? Like a turn 3 of Widow plus Celine was just too strong. And now that that play is gone, now that has to be a turn 4. Now you're spending turn 4 on a low power play. So like I think they really nerfed Celine with that Widow change. But what are you gonna do? This has always been my favorite Gladiator home. I like Gladiator and Destroy because when you whiff, it gives you information about where you're competing, what you're competing with, and when you hit, it's a card you just destroyed, which powers up your Null and Death. It's also perfectly great to eat with Venom. I like it here. I'm a big fan. So I like this deck. It has the extra Forge to play it. Yandu should probably be Nico Minoru here to give it further buffs. Shaw Surfer now can just fit Gladiator, especially in versions that run Cosmo. This is one of my favorite versions of the build. I like versions of this build that don't run Sera because I want to be able to play Shadow King on 5. I want to be able to play Forge, Nova, and the Shard on 5 as necessary, and Sera gets in the way of that. I still get the same number of 3s out, I just have to alter my plays a little more. I think Gladiator is absolutely great here. Like, absolutely great here. This is going to be a good deck, if not a great one. I'd like a second way to get rid of Doc and Shard, but I think Okoye is just enough more important than running Colleen or Carnage. Although Carnage gives us an extra Nova, so maybe Carnage is better. Whatever, it's close enough. Blobnos. This is just a standard Blob Thanos deck that's running a bunch of powerful tempo cards. Stegron, Maximus, Gladiator all work great with Professor X. So does Jeff. That's the whole gist here. This uses Spider Woman. It's just another powerful card in the 5-drop slot. There's 15 cards you can put that 5-card slot. Lambie is partial to Arrow. Martyr. I'm so excited for Martyr. I wish I was kidding. But like I liked Martyr more than most. I played Teeb's Infinite list for quite a while, and I think Martyr is just going to be great. This is Teeb's Zoo list. It's the best Martyr list I've played. Um, Martyr is a 1/5. Now you just have so much more power now, so much more ability to really contest lanes and locations. Goose is absolutely stellar against Blob. I'm going to tell you straight up, I want Shadow King. I might actually just straight up cut Armor. Armor was in this deck because Destroy was all over the meta. That might just be Shadow King because I'm very rarely playing Doom any damn way. So I might just run Shadow King to like end my game because it's only negatively affects Hawkeye and Nebula really. And they've got plenty of other lanes to mess with. So if I can goose one lane and Shadow King in another, then I'm pretty damn good against a card like Blob, right? If I'm good against Blob, this is just putting a lot of power across the board. I'm excited to try this one out. Next up, we have Lockdown, and again, I think Martyr is good with Professor X. A 1/1 Nebula, 1/5 Martyr, and then Ms. Marvel are all, and Mr. Fantastic are all cards that are great with Professor X. So is Atuma, especially with armor. There's just a lot to like here. Everything's really strong. The only thing that doesn't really work here is you don't love Martyr Iron Lad or Iron Lad Atuma. So like be careful with it. Realize you might have to play around those things. But if you otherwise, like the upside is so good. You get second Ms. Marvel, a second Onslaught, a second Claw, 4/6 Professor X, etc. are all extremely strong things to be doing instead. Punisher. We've only got one Punisher deck. Punisher's not very good. Punisher. This is the best I could do for an ongoing Punisher list. I don't think Punisher's good. Don't test Punisher too much. You're gonna lose some cubes. Cool. All right, if you can't find a deck here to try out these new cards, I am so sorry. But as always, we will have 3 brand new decks for you tomorrow to try out. Please don't miss out. It would make us sad, and good luck on the giveaway. Winners announced tomorrow. Peace.